This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there. Hello everyone, I'm Nitsa Hone, and it is Friday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10. This is a series where I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competitive play. Over the last few Fridays, I've looked at red, blue, and black 1-drops, and today I'm continuing looking at 1-drops by looking at white 1-drops. Like red, white is pretty famous for having powerful 1-drop creatures, with white weenie decks often being made up of many highly efficient 1-mana creatures. Remember, for this video, a 1-drop has to be a permanent with a converted mana cost of 1. It does not apply to instants or sorceries, so Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares will not be here. There were 271 cards that were eligible for this list, and in this video we're going to talk about the 10 that have made the biggest impact on competitive Magic. Before we get started, a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. Pro Tour, Mythic Championship, Players Tour, as well as Vintage and Legacy Championship top 8s are worth 2 points, and a Grand Prix or Magic Fest top 8 is worth 1 point. At number 10, it's Legion's Landing. 1 mana for a 1/1 token is nothing special, but Legion's Landing is a lot more than that. As soon as you are able to attack with 3 creatures, it transforms into Adanto the First Fort. Adanto gives you an extra mana and a powerful activated ability that lets you churn out more 1/1 tokens. The great thing about that is, it gives more aggressive decks something to do with their mana if the game goes long, and makes sure you can always add to the board. More aggressive decks can also usually transform Legion's Landing without a whole lot of effort. Legion's Landing gained all of its points in Standard in various aggro decks. This included White Weenie, Boros aggro, Selesnya aggro, and Orzhov aggro. It doesn't have any points outside of Standard, and its spot on this list at number 10 is pretty precarious. At number 9, it's Land Tax. Land Tax is a very old card, dating all the way back to 1994, when it was printed in Legends. Land Tax checks to see if your opponent has more land than you every upkeep, and if they do, you get to grab 3 land cards from your library and put them in your hand. This is an incredibly powerful effect in general. It gives white a way to gain card advantage, something they only get on rare occasions, and it makes sure you never miss a land drop. But it was made even more powerful by the metagame in the early days of Magic. It was used in 2 basic ways. The first of these was by control decks, which combined it with Zuron Orb to have a constant source of life, which would make it very hard for them to ever die. In aggro decks, it was combined with Stormbind, because Land Tax generally gave them a constant source of cards to pitch to the enchantment. Some aggro decks also played Armageddon. Their plan was to get a couple creatures on the board and then cast Armageddon, and from there they could just attack the defenseless opponent, and they could use the Land Tax to make sure they could effectively rebuild in the aftermath if they had to. Land Tax was a fixture in Standard from 1995 to 1996, with 4 top 8s at Worlds in 1995, 4 at Pro Tour New York in 1996, and 3 at Worlds in 1996. Land Tax was too good, and it was eventually banned in Legacy in July of 1996 and extended in July of 1998. All of that made it challenging for Land Tax to put up points after 1996. At number 8, it is Chained to the Rocks. This is a white card that transforms one of your mountains into a prison for one of your opponent's creatures. 1 mana to exile an opposing creature without any real downside is pretty impressive. It does have a significant setup cost though. You can really only play this in a red-white deck, but if your deck can support it, it's great. It's especially attractive for more aggressive decks who want to be able to quickly and efficiently get any roadblocks out of the way so that they can kill the opponent quickly. Its most frequent home in Standard was Boros aggro, but it was also played in Mardu and Naya mid-range decks. It has never found a home anywhere outside of Standard, but the efficiency it offers is hard to overlook, and maybe it could get some points in Pioneer going forward. At number 7, it's Savannah Lions, which is perhaps White's most iconic 1-drop. Dating all the way back to Magic's very first set, Savannah Lions offered impressive efficiency in a time when 1-mana creatures never had 2 power. The Lions were the exception to that. Today, we get 1-mana 2/1s with upside on a regular basis, but creatures have grown more powerful over the years. For a long time, a 1-mana 2/1 with no downsides was strictly something special that White got in Savannah Lions. Savannah Lions has benefited from 2 printings, which gave it legality in Standard twice. In Standard the first time around, it was played in Armageddon aggro decks, like those we mentioned when we talked about Land Tax. After its reprint in 2006, it started to be played in Zoo and Boros aggro decks in Standard, and was also played in Extended as a result of each of its printings. The first time it was played in Boros aggro decks, and the second time it was played in Zoo decks. It has a single point from Legacy too, from way back in 2005. Savannah Lions is highly unlikely to gain any more points outside of Standard, because 1-mana 2/1s with upside are becoming increasingly common, but if there's ever a Standard Legal reprint, Savannah Lions could definitely gain some more points. At number 6, we have Step Lynx, another 1-drop cat. While he doesn't start out quite as big as Savannah Lions, if a deck can consistently trigger landfall, Step Lynx ends up being a 2/3 or bigger every single turn, and that is some serious efficiency. It can even be a 4/5 on many turns as a result of fetch lands. In Standard, it was mostly played in Boros Landfall, an aggro deck that ran a lot of cards to help with landfall, like fetch lands and lots of aggressive creatures with landfall, like the Lynx. In Modern, it has been played in more traditional Boros aggro decks, but it was also played in Death's Shadow Zoo decks. These decks ran lots of cheap creatures like the Lynx, and sought to win the game quickly by getting a huge Death's Shadow. Both the Lynx and the Shadow love fetch lands, so the two worked well together. More recently, though, Death's Shadow decks have moved away from the Zoo shell, and the Lynx doesn't have any points in Modern since 2016. Before the existence of Modern, Step Lynx was also played in Extended, where it was played in White Weenie and Zoo decks, and it was also played in Legacy Zoo decks. At number 5, it is Toolcraft Exemplar. Kind of like Step Lynx, the Exemplar is highly efficient if you jump through the right hoops. In this case, if you have an artifact, he is a 1-mana 3/2, and if you have 3 artifacts, he adds First Strike to the mix too. The Exemplar was played a lot in Standard between 2016 and 2018. Vehicles and artifacts in general were a big part of that Standard format, and as a result, the Exemplar was well suited to those artifact-heavy aggro decks. At number 4, it is Champion of the Parish. Obviously enough, this 1-drop is well suited to human tribal decks because he gets bigger every time you play a human. And if you can play him on turn 1 and just curve out with humans, he quickly becomes a really frightening creature who only costs a single mana. The Champion has been played in human aggro decks in Block, Standard, and Modern. In the latter, human decks continue to be one of the best archetypes in the entire format, and for that reason, it seems likely that the Champion will continue to accumulate points, potentially moving up this list. At number 3, we have Burrington Forge Tender, a white 1-drop who really hates red decks. The Forge Tender is one of the best cards around at countering burn decks, since the protection allows them to block their creatures as long as you need, and the sacrifice effect blinks an entire burn spell, something that can be difficult for burn decks to recover from. As a result of this usefulness, the Forge Tender has seen play across multiple formats where it is a potent sideboard weapon against burn. It doesn't have any points since 2018, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it gain more points in the future. At number 2, it is Mother of Runes, which, like Savannah Lions, is a fairly iconic white 1-drop. The Mother is not as aggressive as most of the cards on this list, but she brings the powerful ability to grant protection to any of your creatures, and you get to choose what color that protection is. Protection is powerful because it can be used to protect a creature from removal and damage, and it can also be used to make a creature unblockable on some board states. There are just a whole lot of ways to make use of protection. Mother of Runes has been played almost exclusively in Legacy, primarily in creature-heavy decks like Stoneblade and Death and Taxes. She is continuing to add to her score, and that could mean she has a chance at surpassing the number 1 card on this list, which is Thraben Inspector. A 1-mana 1/2 that gives you the ability to draw a card later in the game is nice. After all, white doesn't get a whole lot of card draw. It was played in human aggro decks in Standard, as well as several other decks too. Pretty much any deck running white was running Thraben Inspector, making it a staple in the format. One deck that could get particularly good value out of it were the more artifact-based aggro decks, like Mardu Vehicles and Mardu Ballista, which Toolcraft Exemplar would have been in. Thus, the clue is really nice for the Exemplar and other artifact payoffs. The Inspector has also seen a little bit of play in Modern, where it shows up in some human decks, but the vast majority of those decks don't run the Inspector. As a result, the Inspector isn't putting up a ton of points right now, and its spot on this list could be in peril in the future, especially as Mother of Runes continues to accumulate points. Well, that does it for this MTG Top 10. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe, and if you want to catch up on all of the other ones I've already done, you should see the playlist on your screen now. Thanks for watching.